All right, hey everybody, it's Mike McElroy here with Center Coast Realty. Thanks for taking a break from your adult coloring books and 5,000 piece puzzles to watch another update here on the Chicago real estate market. Special edition, we're checking in to see how the coronavirus outbreak and all the changes that we've been making lately to society are affecting the real estate business. We continue to get a lot of questions. The news changes every day, so we're breaking down the raw numbers for you and keeping you updated. So today I have a few more updates about how it's shifting the competitive landscape for buyers and sellers, as well as just disruptions to day-to-day business. Got a little bit of research from Zillow to look at, as well as we're going to look at China and see how things progressed there and see what we can potentially learn from that. So we'll go ahead and get into it here. We're going to start again with supply and demand. Again, we're crunching the raw numbers. I'm going to skip contracts today, the demand side of things, because I really want to see what happens this weekend. We typically see the most contracts after the weekend, so that'll be Monday or Tuesday next week. However, we are going to look at showings, which gives us a little bit of a sneak peek at demand. So our pals over at Showing Time are doing some great work, and we're going to link to this in the blog post. I'm going to have that updated this afternoon, so definitely check this out. But they're tracking showings on a 7-day rolling average. So basically what we're seeing, what they do is they look at the first week of the year in January, and they see where showings are at there. And then every day that goes by, based on a rolling average, they see, are we up or down compared to the first week of January. The first week of January, a little bit slow, but fairly busy. It's kind of the beginning of the year, and people start to get out there to look. So the showing activity peaked last week on Wednesday at about 50%. So in other words, if there were 100 showings a week the first week of January, there were 150 showings the week preceding last Wednesday. So seasonally speaking, compared to 2019, we should be hanging around this peak, if not increasing. But that's obviously not what happened. We are back down to around 12.3%. So in other words, if there were 100 showings the first week of the year, there were 112.3 this past week. So I guess the good news is we didn't go below where we were before yet. We're still higher or on par with what we would be in mid to late January in terms of number of showings. And the other thing to think about, but we are down, we're down significantly. The other thing to think about here is that showings does not equal contracts. We're seeing people be a lot more selective about what they go see in person. This is not a time for going out and seeing 10, 15 showings and, I can't really make up my mind. I need to see some more places. People who are seeing listings right now are interested in buying them. So it doesn't necessarily mean that overall activity is going to be down as much as showings. But we're going to have to wait and see. The other thing that I did want to check in on the other side of things is supply. So in the past week, so just looking back over the past 7 days, we went through, crunched the raw numbers of how many new listings hit the market every single day. So over the past 7 days, there have been about 15.3% fewer listings hitting the market than there were in the 7 days prior to that. And that's as of yesterday. So we're looking Thursday, back 7 days, compared to last Thursday, back 7 days. Okay, so just keeping in mind, I know a ton has happened. Last Wednesday night was when we got the news about the travel ban. Then St. Patrick's Day happened over the weekend. We closed all the bars and restaurants on Sunday, and schools closed on Friday. So that's kind of how the news affected things. So again, about 15.3% looking back about 7 days is the decrease in supplies. Another one I wanted to check in on, though, is the daily numbers. So we always see a big increase in the number of listings, of new listings that hit the market on Thursdays. And this past yesterday, compared to the previous Thursday, there were about 30% fewer listings. So again, 15-ish% looking back for 7 days, but 30% week over week from Thursday. So in other words, the trend of decreasing inventory could be accelerating. We'll have to wait and see. And again, sometimes these numbers kind of shift a little bit just as people update data in the MLS. We're going to keep checking in on it and keep it updated on the blog post for you. So, bottom line in terms of supply and demand, we're just kind of gliding along right now. A little bit lower. We're not crashing. We're just kind of gliding right now. So we're going to have to see, is it going to shape up that this suddenly the market really favors buyers or it really favors sellers? Again, this is evolving every single day. We're going to have to check it out. So we're very curious about what is next. Speaking of what is next, in real estate, we like to look at comps. So in other words, before we put your home on the market, we don't, we want to know what it's worth and what it could sell for. So we check and see what other similar homes that recently sold for. The fortunate thing about being in the United States right now is that we have some comps in terms of other countries, namely China, who went through this experience a couple months ahead of us and is now on their way out of it. So we were able to get our hands on some graphs thanks to our pals at Zillow and Capital Economics. We're looking at graphs of daily sales from China. So let's talk about Chinese New Year. Chinese New Year this year was January 25th, and you might remember a lot of talk around that. Coronavirus is already bad in China. Chinese New Year's coming up. It could really spread at that point. So that was January 25th of this year. Now, here's the thing to know about Chinese real estate that I just learned, which is that daily home sales stop. They go to zero on Chinese New Year every year. Okay, so that always happens, and it certainly happened in 2019. So home sales were like this, and then they go pow on Chinese New Year, and then they go right back up. It's just a quick break. So that's what happened last year in China. This year, what happened was Chinese New Year went to zero. And then instead of shooting back up, it just went like this along the bottom for about it looks like about another 2 weeks. It was basically an 80 to 90% decrease in home sales. But after that, things started to recover. And we're like 6 to 8 weeks out of that right now in China. They're about 6 to 8 weeks out of that. And they're still lower than they were in 2019 in terms of daily home sales, but they're up to about 55, 60% of the level that they were before. Okay, so that's the most recent data. It looks like it is fairly disruptive in terms of real estate transactions, especially in the near term, and then things gradually start to recover. And by gradually, I mean over the span of 6 weeks or so. So that's actually fairly quickly. So what happens after that? We don't know yet, right? Because China's only a month or two ahead of us. But we can also look at the SARS outbreak that happened back in 2003. Again, we'll link to this research from Zillow. It's really good if you want to do a deep dive into it. Definitely check that out. They looked at Hong Kong transaction volume and sales prices. Here's some good news. Even in China right now, we don't really know what this disruption is going to do to home prices. It's still too soon to tell. We can see daily sales, but in terms of trends about median price, it takes a little longer. But looking back at the 2003 crisis, or SARS outbreak in China, Hong Kong home prices didn't really fall significantly. They were off about 1.9% from what researchers think they would have been even without the outbreak. So if you're sitting at home and you're worried about your real estate investment, if you own property currently, it looks like based on if we were to just run the SARS outbreak model through the United States, it wouldn't be it wouldn't have a huge impact on your home value. Transaction volumes fell by about 33%. For it looked like about 5 months for the duration of the extreme part of the outbreak. On average, transaction volumes were down about 33%, but early on they were down by as much as 72%. So for some context, we just saw in China from this most recent outbreak that home sales were down by 80 to 90%. So that's more than 72%. So as we kind of already know, this one's worse than SARS was. So if that 72% number from the initial slide became 80 to 90, then that 33% average, we could see that be 35, 40, 45%. Again, it's not a perfect comp, as we say in the business, but it's something else to look at. So overall, things snapped back quickly. Both transaction volume and home prices didn't really fall much at all. Actually, I take that back. Home prices did fall in Hong Kong, but it's important to note they were falling already. So they're falling already going into the SARS outbreak, and they continued falling, but not dramatically more than they were falling before. So again, not a perfect comp because home prices in Chicago have generally been up or flat for the past couple of years. Okay, so that's what's going on in the Chicago market. That's what we're looking at in terms of some potential comparables in China. I also want to talk a little bit about some of the threats that we checked in on earlier this week. So long-term unemployment economy, Cranes reported about 64,000 unemployment claims over the course of 3 days. That's that hospitality sector that's getting hit pretty hard. So we're definitely going to see that spike this week as people in that sector kind of adjust to the new realities for the duration of these shutdowns. Speaking of shutdowns, another concern for real estate was that title companies and lenders shut down. So we've already seen a few office buildings in the Loop have closed due to cases being found in those buildings. These title companies have offices all over the place, so you can simply reschedule your showing, but that causes some delays. So we have seen a bunch of just shuffling around. Our attorneys are really, really busy just rescheduling showings and trying to get everything on track. But so far, just mild delays, nothing serious. Which brings us to the third thing, which was a San Francisco-style shutdown, shelter in place. There was a big rumor circulating yesterday that was going to happen, and then the governor came on and said that it wasn't going to happen. He didn't exactly say it wasn't, he said that he wasn't announcing it that day, but he didn't exactly say it wasn't going to happen. He said it's something they're seriously thinking about. So as of yesterday, we live to fight another day. As of 12:45 p.m. this Friday the 20th, there has not been a shelter-in-place order. I have to say that rumor mill is still going, though, so it will be interesting to see what comes up at the governor's daily address this afternoon. It's always a possibility. So last but not least, what we're doing, just to touch on this again, Center Coast agents are practicing extreme social distancing and extreme sanitation for buyers and sellers when we're working on showings. We're keeping our team separated. Just in case one of us were to become sick, we don't want to spread that to the rest of the office, and obviously then that's problematic for our clients. And we always do this, but we're doing 3D renderings of our listings. And again, as always, our sellers are getting digital ads targeted at likely buyers for their listings, which is especially helpful now that screen time is pretty high. I'm sure a lot of you have been looking at screens quite a bit over the last couple of days. So that's it for today's update. I'm going to sign off there. Hang in there, folks. Find something creative to do this weekend, and do yourself a favor, go follow Transit T's Instagram account and check out the guy riding the CTA in the bathtub. It's a good one. I'll have more news for you once we get more numbers and once we get more news, so keep checking back to this page. We'll have more updates soon. Thanks.